Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to a new playthrough on the channel. Before we get into this week's playthrough, I want to apologize in advance for how my voice sounds. I caught a cold on Tuesday night and went full court press after it, trying to deal with it quickly. To that end, I might still sound a bit plugged up, but the worst of the laryngitis seems to be gone, so we're going to proceed with this video. After we had a mercy killing to last week's scenario in Zombicide Green Horde, we're going to step into a completely new universe this week. This week we're going to play Dune Imperium. This one is a combination worker placement deck builder. Normally for me, worker placement is a mechanic that I loathe, whereas I like deck builders. But this is a game that I think combines the worker placement and deck builder aspects really well, and I do enjoy this game. I also have the expansion for this game, as you might have seen in my 100th video on the channel, link to which will be in the description down below, but I'm not going to play with the expansion since I haven't had a chance to sit down and learn it yet. In this game, we're playing one of the various leaders in the Dune universe, where our goal is to gain control of the desert world of Arrakis. We do that by collecting victory points, and our goal is to get 10 victory points through conflict, earning reputation with the various factions, and potentially through the deck. For this playthrough, we'll be playing with two Automa opponents using what's called the House Hagal deck while we play the game the full way. I'll explain more about how the House Hagal decks when we get into the actual game, but with that musing, let's drop down and meet our leaders, and we'll start with our first player. The first of our Automa opponents today is Glossu the Beast Robin from House Harkonnen. So, as he'll be doing everything in yellow. If you remember these components from when I unboxed them on December 27th, I'll also put a link to that video in the description down below. We're using fancy components that came with the order from By Your Command. Link to their shop will also be in the description down below. So now that I've had a few chances to play this game and see what it actually is, now I actually have a better idea of what everything is. So, as I mentioned, these are the water. Everyone will start off with a water. I'll talk a little bit more about what I'm starting with because of the difficulty of the game. These are the control markers, and I'll explain more about how those work when we move over to the board. The first player token came with the game. These are actually combat trackers, and I'll show you more about how these work when we start setting the board up. So we've got a 0 marker, and then starting at 20. These are actually victory point trackers. So one will go on the victory point track, and I'll show that when we go to the board. And then the other one I'm probably going to end up using for blocking locations, because there are occasionally effects that make us block certain locations off. Then we've got the agents over here. We've got two agents fully based, and then we've got the third base over here. The reason we've got the third base over here is in a solo game, your one or two Automa opponents actually have their third agent, and I'll show this as well. 5 cards, depending on the difficulty, some number of cards deep in the conflict deck. So in this case, we are 5 cards deep, but I'll explain more about that when we meet the agent I'm playing today. So we'll start moving everything over. So we'll move one of the victory point trackers to the victory point track. Then we'll move the 0 combat marker down to the combat track. And the special ability that we're worried about here, each of these leaders actually has 2 abilities. So we won't worry about the Arrakis. The only ability we have to worry about on the leaders that are using the House Hagal deck is the Signet Ring ability. So if we see the ring icon come up in the House Hagal deck, we need to use this ability. In this case, the ability for the beast is Brutality, where he gains an extra troop into his garrison, or 2 if he has at least 1 faction alliance. I'll explain more about how that works when we move over to the board. But I'll talk more about the House Hagal deck after we meet the second leader that I'm playing against. Our second Automa leader is Earl Memnon Thorvald from House Thorvald. He'll be doing everything in green. So we've got the 2 agents over here. I'll keep those by the leader. Base will go up there. These are the combat trackers. The 0 sword will move over to the combat track. And the victory point tracker will go onto the victory track. So the special ability that we have to worry about is Spice Horde. So whenever the ring signet pops up, he'll gain an extra spice. Now, I do also have to be careful because the Automa leaders have special abilities where they can actually trade some of their resources for victory points. So we'll take a quick look here. Anytime a leader gets 3 intrigue cards, 3 water, 7 Solari, which is the money, or 7 spice, they'll instantly trade those in and earn a victory point. So we do need to be a little bit careful of that. Anyway, I did mention the House Hagal deck a little bit earlier. So here's the House Hagal deck. The way this will work is on an Automa player's turn, they'll flip this over and go to the place that it lists on here, doing the thing on here. If a space is a crossed swords like that, it means it's a conflict space and they can deploy troops from their garrison into the conflict. You can deploy any troops whether it's an Automa or a human player, you can deploy any number of troops gained from that plus up to 2 more. So we'll be going to places in a similar way, but we'll be using the actual deck rather than this House Hagal deck. Also, I didn't mention this, but when an Automa leader's in the conflict, we'll also draw a House Hagal card for them, but this time we'll be looking at the swords to give them extra strength in the conflict. So I'll go ahead and give this a shuffle. That'll probably make more sense as we get into the actual gameplay itself, but I don't expect that to make sense now at first glance, but it probably will as we play it. It probably will make more sense as we actually play through the game. But anyway, give this one more shuffle. And a cut. Put that back there. And with that, let's go meet the leader that I'm playing today. And last but not least, here's the leader I'm playing today. I'm playing Countess Ariana Thorvald. I didn't mention this when I was looking at the other 2 leaders, but up here you can see a difficulty rating in terms of how difficult the leader is to play. Both the Beast and Memnon had a difficulty rating of 1. This leader has a difficulty rating of 3. But I've kind of gotten used to how she works. So because of the difficulty, I'm actually playing on Novice difficulty today. So in addition to the water, I start off with a Spice and a Solari. And I'll be doing everything in red. So once again, we've got the combat tracker icons. I will bring mine over to the board. And unlike their sword masters, mine is actually by the board. So I just need to go up to a space and grab it, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself there. I'll bring my tracker over to the victory point tracker. And then I have to worry about both sides of my abilities. Both of my abilities, in fact, one of them factors into my strategy rather heavily. Because the special ability on here is Spice Addict. Whenever you harvest spice, you gain 1 less spice and draw a card. And the signet ring, when I use my signet ring, is Hidden Reservoir, so I get another water out of that. Which will be important because there are spaces where we will need water to be able to go into them. Namely, mostly the spice harvesting spaces, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself there. We'll take a look at my starting hand very quickly. So I've got my starting deck all ready to go. First up, I have my signet ring, which I can... So the way these cards work is along the left side here, you'll see different spaces. You'll see different symbols, and that will correspond to symbols where you can deploy your agents to. But the white space up here is if you deploy an agent using this card, you get the ability there. If you use this during a reveal turn, you'll get that in the reveal phase. Next up, we have Reconnaissance, so I can use this to deploy to blue spaces, or I get 1 influence during my reveal phase. Next up, a dagger, so I can use this to deploy to any green pentagon spaces, and there are a couple I might go up to looking at it. Then we have Dune the Desert Planet, which I can use to deploy to yellow triangle spaces, getting a or get an influence during the reveal phase. And another Dune the Desert Planet. So once again, deploying to a yellow triangle space and get an influence during the reveal phase. But I think that's everything set to go. So let's move over to the board. I'll explain a little bit more about how each space works, and then we'll reveal our first Imperium Row that we can buy from, and then we'll get into the game. So here's our first look at the board. I'll take you on a brief tour of the board. Over here to the side, we've got the victory point tracker. The game ends when one of us gets up to 10 victory points. We've got the conflict down here. As part of the difficulty, I also start off with 3 garrisoned troops. My rivals don't have anything yet. I'll put yellow up here and green over here. We've got the conflict deck over here, which I'll reveal a new conflict at the start of each round. Then we've got the various faction tracks. So you can see each faction has two specific spaces to it. If you deploy to one of those, you gain a reputation with the faction. When you get up to 2 influence with a faction, you get a victory point. Then when you get above this yellow line, each faction has one of them. You'll get the resource that's indicated there, and then whoever's highest will get the faction alliance token, which is worth a victory point. And there are some cards in the game that are sensitive to having faction alliances with them. So with the Fremen, you get a water. Bene Gesserit, you get an intrigue card. Spacing Guild gives you 3 Solari, and Max, an alliance with the Emperor, gives you 2 troops. I want to explain how each individual space works. I'll explain more about that when I actually move to it. But the one space I do want to point out right now is the Mentat space. So the Mentat space, Mentat basically acts as a mercenary agent that you can use that turn for an extra deployment. Similar to your Swordmaster once you recruit him. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself there. So let's move up and take a look at our first Imperium Row. So the Imperium Row are the 5 special cards that we'll be able to buy. We also have the reserve that's over here. That's going to be over to the side. So we'll take a look at these as well. We have the Arrakis Liaison, Fremen associated faction, which might be sensitive to... There are some cards in deployment that say if you have another faction card in play, do such and such thing. We can deploy to green or blue spaces with that. Then we have the Spice Must Flow, which costs, and the Arrakis Liaison costs 2. The Spice Must Flow costs 9 influence to acquire, but you get a victory point for it. And if you reveal it during the reveal phase, you gain a spice. We also have Fold Space cards, where there's a space on here named Fold Space. If you deploy there, you get one of these, where you can deploy to any space on the board. If you use this to deploy, you draw a card and trash it. Then looking at our first Imperium Row, first up we have Sardaukar Infantry with the Emperor for one influence. You don't get anything if you use this to deploy. In fact, you can't because you don't have any spaces with it. You'll gain an influence and 2 swords during the reveal turn. Next up, a scout for 1 that we can use to deploy to blue or triangle, to circle or triangle spaces. Nothing if we use this to deploy. During reveal, we get 1 influence and 1 sword, but we can retreat up to 2 of our troops. So if we think a conflict isn't worth deploying into, we can pull 2 troops out of it, or if we think we're going to win anyway. Next up, an Imperial Spy for 2 influence. We can deploy to Emperor loyal spaces. If we use this to deploy, we can trash this card to get an intrigue card. During the reveal turn, we get an influence and a sword. Next up, Leet Kynes, loyal with the Emperor and Fremen. It costs 5 to acquire her, but we go up with the Emperor reputation. We can deploy to Fremen or blue circle spaces. Nothing if we use her to deploy. And we get 2 influence for each Fremen card we have in play, including this one. So that wouldn't be worth very much right now. And the last card we have in play for the Imperium Row is Fremen Camp. For 4 cost to acquire. We can use this to deploy to triangle spaces. If we use this to deploy, we spend 2 spice to get 3 more troops. During a reveal phase, we get 2 influence and a sword. So that's the Imperium Row. I think that's everything set up, so let's move back up top, and we'll get our game started with our first conflict. Alright, so we're back up top. Our first conflict for the game is going to revolve around a skirmish. If we're in first place, we get a victory point. Second place gets us a water. And the third place isn't going to be available in a 3-player game. So, we'll start off. There's an argument to be made to deploy into that right away. But, well, I do have an advantage in this round as well, because I am going last. I am the last player for this turn. So, we'll go ahead and get started right away. So, the Beast comes into the House Hagal deck, and he's going to move to Highliner. So he'll move one of his agents over to this Highliner space, which means he goes up in reputation with the Spacing Guild, gains 3 troops, and immediately deploys them into the conflict. So one thing the AI tends to do that I've noticed is they tend to be a little bit more... This deck tends to be a little bit kind of luck-based in terms of how early they get stuff going. Anyway, looking at Memnon, we see that he gets to go to Arrakis, which gives him a troop and his Signet Ring ability, so he does get a spice. So he goes to Arrakis, which gives him a troop, and he'll immediately deploy that into the conflict. So if they're moving already, I'm inclined to stay clear of this conflict, personally. But anyway, I think what I will do, though, is I'm going to kind of start building up my reserves a little bit. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to use the Signet Ring to deploy for another water. So that'll give me another water. And then where am I sending to? I think I'm actually going to send to Carthage. So if I wanted to, I could deploy into this conflict, but I think it's a little early to be committing resources, so I'll just garrison that right now. And then I get an intrigue card, which an intrigue card you can use. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can use them basically in whatever phase it instructs you that you can use it, and do whatever it says. So we'll take a look at this. Rapid mobilization as a plot. I can deploy any number of my garrisoned troops to the conflict. Like I said, that's probably not something I'm going to want now, but I'll save that. I'll save that for later when I need to, when I need to land a big blow. But anyway, coming over to the Beast, back to the House of Gaul deck. He'll move to the Hall of Oratory, which will give him another troop in his garrison. Then looking at Memnon, we'll send him over to Stillsuits. So that'll give him another reputation with the Fremen, but he doesn't get the water from that, thankfully. Yeah, because you give them whatever it says on the card. So, yeah. Alright, and then my last deployment before I take my reveal turn. I think we're going to go ahead and... Yeah, I can't deploy up to the green Pentagon spaces because the only space I have Glossu moved to. So what I think I will do is I think I'm going to settle in and see if I can get things moving. And yeah, so I'm going to use Dune the Desert Planet to deploy to the Great Flat, spending both of my water to give myself 2 spice and draw a card. Remember, because because my character's a spice addict, I start off with, I gain 1 less spice, but that lets me draw a card, so I'll draw. Convincing argument. Okay, this I don't mind too much. So the Great Flat, so the way that space works is you get the number of spice on there plus whatever bonus spice gets put on there during the maker phase. So that's how that works. But anyway, so that's it for the agent turns because all of our agents are out, so I get a reveal turn. The sword from the dagger won't do anything. And then I have 4 total influence to buy with. So let's move up to the Imperium Row. 4 influence is going to be the Fremen camp. So once again, I can use this to deploy to triangle spaces. If I use this to deploy, I spend 2 spice to get 3 troops. Or a reveal phase gives me 2 influence and a sword. When you buy, it moves to your discard pile. And then replacing it, you replace immediately in this game. I happen to be out of influence, so I won't be buying anything else. Replacing it is a Bene Gesserit sister for 3, which you can use to deploy to Bene Gesserit or Green Pentagon spaces. If you use it during a reveal turn, you get 2 influence or 2 swords. That might be a good thing to grab, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Anyway, that will do it for my reveal turn. Everything I used moves to the discard pile. Now let's move back up top into the combat phase. Alright, we're back up top into the combat phase. So, with the Automa opponent, with the Automa characters having water, or having skin in the fight essentially, we come to the House of Gaul deck and reveal extra cards. Each leader will get the swords on that card, so for the Beast, he'll get an extra 3 swords, which will bring yellow up to 9 strength. And then for green, for Memnon, he gets 3 as well. That brings him up to 5. So the Beast, so yellow has won the conflict. I'm just double checking something here real quick. I don't think... Okay, so they do get... Player with the second highest strength gains the second reward. Okay, so I did have to double check that, because I always get that wrong. But anyway, so yellow has won the conflict with a strength of 9, which means yellow gains a victory point, and green gets a water. So that's the combat phase. Maker phase, where there isn't an agent deployed, so in this case, the Haga Basin and the Imperial Basin will both get bonus spice. The Great Flat won't because I have an agent there. But anyway, now we'll recall agents back to their leaders. Yes, I know I'm sniffling. No, I'm not going to cut it. So, I did mention something at the beginning of the video. I'm still kind of getting over a cold a little bit, but anyway, then we'll reset all of that to 0. And now we're ready to start round 2 with a new conflict. Our second conflict, I'll draw my new hand of 5 cards after I reveal this conflict. So now we're into stage 2 conflicts already, because we built it with 1, 1, 5 2s, and all 4 4s. So our next conflict is control of the Mentat. So first place gets the Mentat, an intrigue card, and 2 Solari. Second place gets an intrigue card and 2 Solari. Then we'll draw a new hand of 5 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4. I immediately have to reshuffle. So I'll do that on camera very quickly. Five. Also, first player will pass to Memnon this round. So my hand consists of that Fremen camp that we just picked up. So this might be... We might be able to get... this is going to be an interesting decision. Do I deploy... Do I use this to deploy, or do I want to get my... I kind of want to get my Swordmaster this round. We'll have to see how that works out, though. I've got to have a little bit of a plan with that. Then we have a dagger, which will let me deploy into green spaces. Another convincing argument, which I won't be using to deploy with. Diplomacy, so now I can go looking for allies, and I might want to do that. And seek allies, so we can definitely get moving on diplomacy if I want to this round. And that's actually that actually might not be a terrible idea. Also, these are going to move back to the supply. So we'll move next into player turns. Alright, Earl as first player goes into the House Hagal deck first. He finds he's going up to conspire, so he'll go up to this space. He'll go up with the Emperor, and he'll gain 2 troops in his garrison. Then for my first player turn, I'm trying to decide if I take a turn off and get some allies, or do I go ahead and get my Swordmaster now? I think I want to start seeking some allies, so I'm going to use Seek Allies, deploy one of my agents up to a Fremen space so I can get my reputation with the Fremen up, because that's going to fit into my plan. Grab a water, and I'll end up trashing Seek Allies. Then for the Beast, who is the last player in this round, he'll deploy to Secrets. So he'll go here, and his Bene Gesserit rep will go up. Then Memnon's second agent will actually be going to Harvest Spice. So he'll send an agent to where with the most bonus spice, or total spice if tied. If no spaces have bonus spice, reveal another card. So send an agent to the space with the most bonus spice. So it's going to be one of these spaces, but he's going to go to Haga Basin because it's got the most total spice, which gives him another 3. So that'll bring him up to 4 spice. And then he'll deploy his 2 troops into the conflict, which will bring green up to 4 strength. Then, for me, I will use diplomacy. Actually, I'm going to take one more turn off from getting my Swordmaster, but I need to make that a pretty big priority. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go up to... I'm going to use the dagger to deploy to the Hall of Oratory so I can get another troop, and I have 1 extra influence this round. So that goes into my garrison. Then for the Beast, he goes to rally troops, so he gets another 4 troops into his garrison. Yellow's going to be a big problem, so 3 and 4. Alright, then we're all out of agents, so now it's a reveal turn, which means I will reveal a total of 5 influence, but it's actually 6 because I have the 1 extra from going to the Hall of Oratory. So let's move up to the Imperium Row and see what I'm doing with that. Remembering that I have 6 influence, including the 1 I got from going to the Hall of Oratory, I think for 5 I'll buy Leet Kynes. So for buying this, I do get to go up with Emperor reputation. And then for replacing that first will be the Voice, which is a 2 cost. I can deploy to circle or triangle spaces. I can choose any board space, and opponents can't send their agents there this round, or 2 influence if I reveal that during an influence turn. Then for 1, I'll grab the Scout because I can use that to deploy to circle or triangle spaces. Then replacing that will be a Power Play for 5 influence. You can deploy to any faction space. You gain 2 influence instead of 1, but trash this card. So that's something you can use if you need to get a jump on a reputation. But anyway, that will do it for my reveal turn. Now we'll move back up top for an unopposed combat. Only green is deployed into the conflict this time, but he still has to reveal a card for extra swords, so he finds another 2. Not that we needed extra help there, so those go to the supply. Green obviously wins the conflict, so he gets the Mentat, which will be an extra agent for him next turn. He gets an intrigue card, and remember he can trade 3, the automatas can trade 3 of these in for victory points, and he gets 2 Solari. Alright. Then we move into the Maker phase. This time only Hagab Basin doesn't get bonus spice, but the Imperial Basin and the Great Flat both do. So now we recall agents. There's yellow. And there's green. Okay. Now, we have to be a little bit careful because Memnon now essentially has a 3rd agent turn thanks to the Mentat. Anyway, I will become the first player, and then we'll get started with round 3. Round 3, right now, the Beast and I both have 5 troops in our garrisons, and I haven't gotten into a conflict yet. Victory points haven't gone too far yet, but let's see what our 3rd conflict is all about. Ooh, you get to choose 2 on this one. Advance reputations, I think that's 1 reputation with each faction. Second, a water and 2 Solari. This might be one where I actually want to deploy into it. But let's take a look at my starting hand. I'm going to try to deploy if I can, but if I can't, this might be a good turn to go get my Swordmaster. So first up, we find the Dune the Desert Planet, so that's the first part of being able to get my Swordmaster this round. Then we have a Signet Ring, which I can probably use those. I can probably use those 2 together to go get the Swordmaster right away. Then we have a Convincing Argument, which I won't be using for deployment. A Dagger, which I can use for deployment. I've got some options on that. And finally, another Dune the Desert Planet, which I can use for deployment. So, I think the first part of this is I'll use the Signet Ring to deploy. I'll send an agent up. I'll get a water as well for that. Then I'll send my first agent up to sell Melange. Now you can trade any number of spice in for the corresponding amount of Solari. In this case, I have 3 spice, which I'm going to trade all of it in to get 8 Solari back, which will bring me up to 9 Solari. And I only need 8 to get the Swordmaster, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because we find the Beast first. Going to Carthag, he'll immediately deploy 3 troops into the conflict. 1 plus the 2 he gets from... the 1 he gets plus the additional 2 from the space. Then Memnon, the first of his 3 agent turns. I'm eventually going to have 3 as well coming out of this. He'll conspire, which will give him more reputation with the Emperor, which will also give him his first victory point. So he's on the board now as well. I'm still at 0, but he gets 2 troops into his garrison. Then for my second agent turn, if I can ever pick these cards up, there we go. We'll use a dagger to deploy up to the Swordmaster space, where I'll pay 8 Solari, like the 8 I just got from trading with, the 8 I just got from selling spice. So there's my 8 Solari, which will give me my 3rd Swordmaster. So now I have a 3rd agent turn as well, effectively. Alright, and then the Beast, who will be out of agents after this, will harvest spice. So he'll go to Imperial Basin because he's got the most bonus spice, so he gets 3. And then he'll deploy 2 more troops into the conflict. Now, as much as I wanted to deploy into this, I don't think it's really worth it right now since I'd have to get 10 strength committed to it in a hurry. I mean, I could with my plot, but I don't think it's worthwhile. These are my deployment cards. Alright, anyway. Our second agent will turn for Thorvald. Selective breeding, which is still open, so he'll move his agent there and advance with the Bene Gesserit as well. Then for my last agent turn, I will use... Right, I can't deploy with that. I will use a Dune the Desert planet, and I'll move to the Great Flat, spending my 2 water, which will give me 3 spice, because remember, I gain 1 less. But I get to draw a card. Hopefully this won't be something I wanted to use next turn. Reconnaissance. This I can probably work without. Okay, so I'm just looking ahead to my next agent turn. But anyway, we have one more. We have the Mentat turn for Thorvald. He'll go to Carthage, except he can't because there's already an agent there. Instead, he'll go... as I drop the card, but we see he's going to Fold Space. So he's sending the Mentat there, which will advance his reputation with the Spacing Guild as well. Anyway, that's it for agent turns. So in my reveal turn, I have 4 influence. So with that, we'll go ahead and move up to the Imperium Row. Alright, for 4 influence... 2 of it will go to the voice, which I can use, which as you recall, I can use this to deploy to circle or triangle spaces and block enemy agents off. Then we will replace that with Duncan, Idaho for 4. I can use this to deploy to blue circle spaces. If I reveal this if I use this to deploy, I can spend a water to get a troop and draw a card. If I reveal this, I get a water and two swords in the conflict. And since I have 2 influence left, I'll go ahead and buy the Imperial Spy, which I can use to deploy to Emperor spaces. Trashing this card gets me an intrigue card, and during the reveal, I get a sword and an influence out of it. But anyway, replacing that will be Guild Administrator with the Spacing Guild, so I can deploy to Spacing Guild or Triangle Spaces. Trashing, I believe that's any card. Let me double check that real quick. There's got to be a guide for the iconography on here. Yes, trash a card. Basically, trash a card from your hand, discard area, or in play, or we get an influence with that. So with that, let's move back up top for the combat phase. It's another unopposed one. So the Beast is getting another unopposed combat here, but he does have to reveal a card from the House Hagal deck. He doesn't get any additional swords. He does win the conflict, so all of his troops go back to the supply. And then the 2 factions he'll gain reputation in are the Fremen and the Emperor, because he gains the reputation with the factions he has the least. Then we go into the Maker phase, which puts out new bonus spice. Then we recall agents. Bring those back to me. Alright, those go back to yellow. These go back to green. And the Mentat goes back to its space on the board. And with that, we'll be about to start round 4. So let's reveal a new conflict card. Okay, I think this is the 4th round of the game. So let's go ahead and reveal what our next conflict is going to be. Yep, it feels like we have one more round before they get their Sword Masters as well. So let's see what this conflict is about. Okay, this one's about a terrible purpose. Get a victory point and you can trash a card. Second place gets you a water and a spice. So I'll give my deck a shuffle. Then we'll reveal my starting hand. Then we'll go into agent turns. cut. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, looking at the hand. I've got plenty of spite. I've got plenty of influence. I can also deploy for some allies, and I might this round. This looks like it might be a good conflict to get into if I can. I'm definitely the one with the strongest garrison right now. I'm probably going to try to spend a little bit of time strengthening that as well. But anyway. Alright, the Beast is our first player this round, so he will start off by going to harvest spice. So the most bonus spice right now is Haga Basin, which means he will get 3 spice, bringing him up to 6. And he'll get to deploy his last troop into the conflict. And Memnon will go to Hardy Warriors, which will advance green up with the Fremen, giving green another victory point, and giving him 2 troops, and deploying into the conflict. So that brings green all the way up to a combat strength of 8. Then for my first deployment, let me look at what I want to do. I'm not deploying with that. I'm going to deploy with diplomacy. So I'll send my first agent down to the other Fremen space, which will get me a water, and move my reputation up with the Fremen. So now I'm on the board with a victory point. Right, so that's the only one I'm not deploying with. Then the Beast goes to harvest spice as well. So he goes to the space with the most spice. He'll go to the Great Flat, which would let him deploy. And actually, I'm also going to deploy into the conflict. So my troop strength's up to 4. I did forget I wanted to get into this conflict as well if I could. Anyway, right. Glossu just harvested spice again. So he's going up to this. Okay, this time he went to the Great Flat because he went to the bonus spice the first time. So he's going to be at 9 spice, except he's going to end up at 2 because he'll spend 7 spice to get another victory point. Then Memnon will deploy to Arrakis, which means he gets his Signet Ring ability, so he gets a spice as well, which will bring him up to 5. He'll move to Arrakis, get another troop, and immediately deploy it into the conflict. And I've probably already committed a little more than I wanted to, but I think we're going to deploy for... I think we're going to do a little bit of reconnaissance, actually. So I'm going to use that to deploy up to Siege Tar. I do have 2 influence with the Fremen, so I can go there, which will give me another troop. And I can deploy 2 more into the conflict. So I think I actually will. I'm going to plan on taking a little bit of time to strengthen my hand, probably in the next couple of turns. And then because I have my Swordmaster, I actually have 1 more deployment, which I will deploy up to... I'll use this to deploy to the Emperor space. I'm not going to trash it yet. So I'm going to deploy up to Wealth, which will increase my standing with the Emperor and tie the game again at 2 victory points. But more importantly, that will give me 2 Solari. And then that will do it for agent turns. So my reveal phase is going to consist of 3 influence. With that, we'll go ahead and move up to the Imperium Row. 3 influence is going to turn into the Bene Gesserit sister, so I can start deploying to Bene Gesserit in green spaces. Anyway, that will do it for my reveal turn. Unfortunately, my troop strength is kind of stuck where it is, so we'll move back up top to see what I'm getting surprised with. Before I move into combat, I did forget to replace the Imperium Row. So the Imperium Row Gets Dr. Yue for 1 influence. I can deploy to circle spaces. If I use him to deploy, I draw a card. And I get an influence, or I get an influence if I use him on a reveal turn. But anyway, looking at the beast first, who's got a combat strength right now, or conflict strength right now of 2. He gets another 2 swords, which means he's going to be getting the 3rd place reward. I will be getting no less than the 2nd place reward, depending on what Memnon pulls. Actually, I'm pretty much locked into the 2nd place reward either way. I'll explain why, depending on what this card does. Fold space for another 1. So if that would have been a 0 reward, what would have happened is both Memnon and I would have tied, so we would have dropped down and gotten the 2nd place reward, and then the beast would have been stuck with a 3rd place reward anyway. So anyway, for 1st place, Memnon gets a victory point, so he takes the lead at 3. I'm actually kind of happy with getting the 2nd place reward here, which gives me a water and a spice. Kind of opens up my options a little bit. Then the 3rd place, the beast just gets a spice. So now into the maker phase, Imperial Basin gets a bonus spice. Then we recall agents. One, two, three. And we'll be into the 5th round, which will also give my Automa opponents their Sword Masters. So let's transition into that. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is the turn where the Automa opponents get their Sword Masters. Memnon... was this my starting... Okay, this is my starting hand, it looks like. So, yeah. Memnon becomes our first player. Our conflict this time is raiding stockpiles. 1st place gets you an intrigue card and 3 spice. 2nd place gets you 2 spice. 3rd place gets you 1. Anyway, let's get these Sword Masters placed for the Automa opponents. I think I like these bases a lot more now that I've had a chance to play with them a few times. They do actually sit in there pretty well, and they're standing up for me, so... And I'm still very much in the thick of things here with 2 victory points. Anyway, Memnon finds he's going to the Hall of Oratory first, which will give him another troop in the garrison. All of these are gone, by the way. I was the only one coming out of that with troops in the garrison, but now he's got one there as well. Then for my turn, taking a quick look at my hand, I've got a bunch of ways I can deploy. So I think what I do here is I kind of do want to spend a little bit of time rallying some troops. So I'm going to use Elite Kinds, since I only have one other, since this is my only Fremen card right now. I'm going to use that to deploy for a Fremen space, spending a water to go up to Hardy Warriors. I may try to get that water back, but I get 2 troops, and I actually am going to deploy into this conflict. So right now I'm at a strength of 6 in the conflict. Then the beast, I'm going to be shuffling the House Hagal deck in a minute here. We'll be going to Arrakis and getting his Signet ability, so he'll get 2 troops, both of which he can deploy into the conflict because he's going to Arrakis. So that brings the beast up to 4 combat strength. Then the last card for Memnon, which will be his 2nd agent turn. There we go. Is going to Still Suits. I was planning on going there this turn, but anyway. So that means now Memnon is also one away from an alliance with the Fremen. Fortunately, I will be first player next round. So if I want the alliance with the Fremen, it's mine for the taking. And I might. But anyway, I'm going to give the House Hagal deck a quick shuffle. So let me make sure how that works right. I think it just says you get the stuff on the card. You don't actually get what's on the space. All normal cost. It only gets the effects on the revealed card. Okay, good. I did want to double check that. But anyway, so we just sent Memnon's second agent out, which means I'll be sending my second agent out momentarily. Alright. Then looking at my hand, I'm actually going to use the Signet Ring to get that water back, and then I will deploy to the Imperial... I can deploy to Pentagon, Square, or Triangle spaces. Where do I want to go? I think I want to go to... I think we're going to go to Siege Tabor. So which will give me a troop, which I'll immediately deploy into the conflict. And I get another water, which I'm going to probably need the water coming up. Anyway, the Beast, his second agent will be going up to Secret, so he'll be getting his Bene Gesserit rep up, which will bump him up to 3 victory points as well. Then Memnon will be trying to go to Arrakis, except he can't because one of the beasts already has an agent there. So we'll try again. Still no dice on Arrakis. Rally troops. Oh, this could be a dangerous space for him to go to, because we don't need them getting more troops. Especially green right now. Then my last agent will be going to... my last agent will actually be going to Dune the Desert Planet, because I've got a bit of a plan here. So we'll be using Dune the Desert Planet. I'll spend 2 water to go to the Great Flat, which means I'll gain 2 spice, but I'll draw a card. Hopefully this isn't something I'm going to need next turn. The voice, I can probably live without this, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself on that. Then the Beast's last card, the Beast's last House of Gaul card, is another Harvest Spice. So he goes to the space with the most bonus spice, which gives him 2, brings him up to 5. And he can deploy into the conflict, except he's got no more troops to deploy in. Anyway, that will do it for the agent turns. Now for my reveal turn, I see that I've got 2 influence and 2 more swords, so my combat strength goes up to 8, and I will move up to the Imperium Row. Okay, for 2 influence, I think 1 I'll grab Dr. Yua. So once again, I can deploy to blue spaces. If I use them to deploy, I draw a card, or I get an influence during a reveal turn. I'm probably going to buy the Sardaukar infantry for 1, but replacing Dr. Yua first will be a Gunthopter for 4. This may be one of the next cards I try to buy. So I can deploy to circle or triangle spaces. If I use this to deploy, each opponent loses 1 garrisoned troop. And if I use this during a reveal phase, 3 swords, and I may deploy a troop to the conflict. As I mentioned, I will buy the Sardaukar infantry, which gives me an influence and 2 swords on reveal turn. Replacing that is Siege Reverend Mother for 4, Bene Gesserit and Fremen, both of which I can deploy to. If I have a Fremen Bond, which is just another card of the same faction in play. Let me double check that. Yeah, if I have 1 or more other Fremen cards in play. So if I have 1 or more other Fremen cards in play, this doesn't count, but Elite Kinds would. I get 3 influence and a spice. So anyway, that will do it for the reveal turn. 1, 2, 3. I'm just going to draw my hand for the round now so I don't forget, because otherwise I'm likely to. But we actually won't look at it until we get the next round started, so 4-5. All right, with that, let's move back up top into a hotly contested combat phase. Okay, this is a combat where I'm probably not too bothered about getting surprised out of the House Hagal deck. In fact, well, we still have some of the biggest threat cards coming, but I already have enough spice right now to be able to do what I hope to be able to do on my next turn. But let's see what we get here. We get surprised on that pretty badly. So the beast gets 5 combat strength, which brings him up to 9. So that means he wins the conflict. He gets 3 spice, which I'll leave 1 and give him another victory point, bringing him up to 4. And an intrigue card. Remember, he can turn 3 of those in for a victory point. I get 2 spice, which, like I said, that doesn't really impact my plans at all. So I'm going to go up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to go up to 8 spice. I'm going to leave 1 of these and take a 5 out of there. Then in the maker phase, the Haga Basin gets a bonus spice put on it. Now we'll recall agents. Bringing agents back to their respective leaders. And with that, we'll get ready to move into round 6. We're on round 6, and I'm the first player. So after this conflict, we're going to be into the stage 3 conflict. Yep, I'm at 2 victory points as well. So we find... This one is Cloak and Dagger. First place, you go up by 2 with any faction and gain 2 intrigue cards. Second place, you get an intrigue and a spice. Third place, you get an intrigue or a spice. Now, since I'm first player, that alliance token with the Fremen is mine for the taking. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to get to it right now. So I think what we're going to have to do is I'm going to have to dig for it a little bit. So I'm going to use the Fremen camp along with... actually, we're not going to use the Fremen camp with the water. So we're not going to use the water. So I will spend 2 spice to get 3 troops in my garrison, though. And I think we're going to go to the Imperial Basin, mostly so I can draw a card. So I can go digging for something that'll either let me take the Fremen Alliance token or put my other plan into motion. This will not help. That's unfortunate. Okay, that will do it for me, for my first card. The Beast will be going to rally troops. Oh, joy. Just when I need 4 more... Oh, wait. Okay, let's actually give the right leaders their agent. Let's actually give the leaders their agents. So, anyway, yellow will go there and get 4 troops in the garrison. Then, for Memnon in the House Hagal deck, he will go get the Fremen Alliance. That's unfortunate. So he'll go to Still Suits. He'll get the water and the Alliance token, which gives him another victory. Which actually gives him another 2 victory points, because that gives him 3 water. So that brings him up to 4. So it means we're up to 5 victory points total for him. Then for my turn, I can't even put the next part of my plan into motion yet. I'll use Dr. Yua to deploy to a blue space. I will go to... let's go to Arrakis, which will give me a troop, and I can deploy 2 into the conflict. This one I kind of want to deploy into. So that'll bring me up to 6 troop strength. But because I used Yua to deploy, I'll draw a card. So I'll draw a dagger, which will let me go to a green space. Alright, then the Beast, second agent. We'll go up to Wealth, which is the Emperor space. So he advances up with the Emperor faction, which brings him up to 5 victory points. Then Memnon We'll go to Fold Space, which will advance his reputation with the Spacing Guild, and give him another victory point. He's up to 6. They kind of left me in the dust a little bit because I sat back and was trying to wait for my spot, but unfortunately I don't think it's ever going to come. Then for my third agent turn, I don't think I want to harvest spice right now. I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to... I'm going to use Reconnaissance to go to Carthage as well, which will let me deploy, which will give me another troop for the garrison, and going there gives me an intrigue card, so I'll pick up Master Tactician, so I can either gain 3 swords or retreat up to 3 of my troops. We'll see what happens with the last 2 cards for last 2 agents for the House of Gaul deck for the Automa opponents. Anyway, the beast will find. He's going to harvest spice. So the most bonus spice is Haga Basin, which gives him another 3, bringing him up to 4. And he'll deploy 2 troops into the conflict. So I'm probably going to need something that's going to keep me away from them. So the third card for Memnon is Conspire, which is still open. So he goes up with the Emperor as well, and he gains 2 more troops in his garrison. That's going to be fun to deal with. And then for my reveal turn, I get a sword. I get 2 more swords and 4 influence. So that brings me up to a combat strength of 8. Then we'll move up to the Imperium Row. With 4 influence, I really wanted to grab Duncan here, but I think I'm going to be a lot better served if I grab the Gunthopter instead. So if I use this to deploy to circle or triangle spaces, each opponent loses 1 garrisoned troop, or I get 3 swords and I can deploy a troop from my garrison to the conflict. So all of that goes to the discard pile. I will draw 5 cards for my next round's hand. Then replacing it in the Imperium Row will be Worm Riders with the Fremen, so 6 to acquire. I can deploy to circle or triangle spaces. I get 2 spice if I use it to deploy. In the reveal phase, if I have 2 influence with the Fremen, I get 4 more swords. If I have the Alliance token, which now I have to surpass Memnon in reputation to get it, I get an additional 2. But anyway, that will do it for the reveal phase. Now let's move back up top for a combat phase that I kind of need to win. Once again, we need to not get whammied out of the House of Gaul deck. That consists of getting hit with no less than 3 swords. So we find 4 swords. But we do have an intrigue card that I can use to put paid to that, so I'll use Master Tactician here to give myself another 3 swords. So 1, 2, 3, which lets me win the conflict. So I get to go up with a faction of my choosing. I will choose to go up with the Spacing Guild, and I get 2 more intrigue cards. So first up I find Water of Life. So if I spend a water and a spice, I get to draw 3 cards, which might be very tempting. Especially since this round I really need to go digging. And Plans. 3 influence or more, I get a victory point. Or 3 influence on 4 faction tracks, I get 2 victory points. Looking at it right now, I've got 3 influence on 1, 2 on 1. I've got 3, 2, 1, and 0 up right now. So I'm going to need to work on my reputation a little bit. Then for second, the Beast gets a Spice, which will bring him up to 5. And another Intrigue card. So I've got to be careful with these Intrigue cards because they can trade them in for 3. They can trade 3 in for a victory point as well. But anyway, that will do it for this round. Now we're going to be into round 7. Round 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, round 7. Before we do that, we actually have the maker phase. So the Great Flag gets a bonus spice. Then we recall agents. Three. Get them to the right color. 2, 3. Now we'll get started with round 7, and the Beast will become our first player once again. Our first Stage 3 conflict has us fighting for Carthag. 2 victory points, and you get to place one of your control tokens, which is one of these, on Carthag. Second place gets you an intrigue card and 3 spice, or third place gets you 3 spice. And the Beast is our first player. Fortunately, his troop strength isn't too much. Memnon's the one I'm more worried about. He finds selective breeding is where he's going, so yellow goes here and continues to advance in alliance with Bene Gesserit. Memnon will go to Carthag, get another troop, and he can deploy up to 2 into the conflict. So that brings him up to a troop strength of 6 already. And then from my hand, let me take a look at this. Okay, now I actually can... Alright, so that I can't deploy it with, any way I slice it. So this is what I can deploy it with. I actually am going to put my plan into motion. So I'm going to use diplomacy to move... I'm going to use diplomacy and spend my 6 spice to move up to Highliner, which will be my second reputation with the Spacing Guild, which will also give me a victory point. Give me 5 troops into the garrison and to water. And I think I'm going to... do I want to throw everything into this conflict? 2 victory points gets me caught up in a hurry. Yeah, I mean, 2 victory points is not something to sneeze at, so I'm going to throw everything I've got into this one. Especially since I'm hoping I'll be reshuffling... My plan is to end up reshuffling my deck this round, so that brings me up to a combat strength of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can't do first grade math, I'm up to 14. Then the Beast will try to move to Carthag, except Memnon is an agent there, so he can't. He'll go harvest spice. Most bonus spice is the Great Flat, which will give him 4. He'll net down to 2 and get another victory point, bringing him up to 6. And then he'll deploy 2 troops into the conflict as well, so he's at 4. Green's at 6. Yeah. All right, then Memnon's second agent will be going to harvest spice as well. So he'll go to Haga Basin, which will give him 2 spice, but he'll spend 7 to get another victory point. Then 2 troops into the conflict, bringing him up to 10. Then for my second agent, I will deploy to... I'm going to use a... Probably going to need that Bene Gesserit's sister, actually. So, yeah. I'm going to use Dune the Desert Plan. That's a bad idea, actually. I'm going to use the Voice to go to Arrakis to give me another troop, which will go into the conflict. And since I'm using it to deploy, I can choose a board space where they can't go there for the round. I'm going to choose... Let me look at the rest of my deployment cards. I'm going to deploy to... I'm going to block off... I'm going to block off the Beseech Tabor, actually. Actually, they're not wanting to go there anyway. I'm going to block off Hardy. No, I can't do that either. Basically, I want to block off a space that I want to go to myself. So I think I'm just going to block off the Hall of Oratory. Actually, no. Better idea. Do I have another green card in my hand? Yes, I do. Actually, I have the Benny. Well, I'm going to block off the Yeah, I'm going to block off rally troops. I don't want them to be able to gain a bunch of troops right now. Anyway, the Beast's third agent turn is the Hall of Oratory, which is where I was planning to go, but I can't help that now. Then Memnon will deploy to Highliner, except he can't because I'm already there. And that's a whammy out of the deck, so that's also very helpful. And Fold Space, so he will deploy to Fold Space, which will advance him up the reputation track. Then for my third turn, unfortunately, I can't rally troops because I don't have enough Solari to do it. I'll use the... No, I'm not going to use the Bene Gesserit sister. I'm going to use the Dune Desert Planet to go to Choam, secure a contract, and get 3 Solari. Because I do want to be able to... 3 brings me up to 6. I do want to be able to deploy... I do want to be able to rally troops next turn. Anyway, that's all of the agents out. My reveal turn is either 2 influence or 4... It's either 3 influence and 2 swords, or 1 influence and 4 swords. There's nothing up there for 1 influence I want to buy, and I want to make sure I want to try to make sure I win this conflict if I can. So I'm going to take the 4 swords. There's nothing up in the Imperium Row that costs 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then with that, we'll go into the combat phase. So once again, I need to not get whammied here. The Beast finds another 1 sword out of the House Hagal deck. Memnon's the one I'm worried about. Actually, I'm probably not too worried about him right now. So he'll find another 2. I will win the conflict, however, which will give me 2 victory points and control of Carthag. So from now on, anybody who goes to Carthag has to pay me a Solari to do it. Memnon was in second place, so he gets another Intrigue card and 3 Spice. And the Beast just gets another 3 Spice, so he'll go up to 5. Alright, Maker phase, the Imperial Basin gets a bonus Spice. Then I'll recall Agents. That going to Highliner was a really smart play on my part. But I'll recall these. It decimated my garrison troops to be able to do it, but I'm kind of at a point in the game where I basically need to go all in on these conflicts. Anyway, let's go ahead and recall Agents. Especially, I think all of these are going to have 2 victory point conflicts. So basically anything that's now gone. So basically anything that gives me troops into the conflict needs to be a space I go to. Anyway, that will do it for that round. I've now kind of caught back up a little bit with 5 victory points, but let's start round 8. Our conflict for round 8 will have us fighting for the Imperial Basin, similar to what we had with Carthag. 2 victory points in control of Imperial Basin to first place, 5 Spice to second place, 3 to third. Then Memnon becomes our first player, and he starts us off by going to Carthag. So he does get a troop, and he can deploy 2 more into the conflict, so that's a total of 6 right away for green. But he does have to pay me a Solari to do it. So, because remember, I took control of Carthag in the last phase. Now as we look at my hand... Okay... I think we'll use the Signet Ring right away to get another water. And then I will deploy up to rally troops where I wanted to go. So that'll be 4 Solari to rally more troops. And then the Beast will deploy his first agent into the Hall of Oratory to get another troop for his garrison. Memnon will go harvest spice, which is the Imperial Basin, so he'll get 2 spice, going up to 5, and then he can deploy his last troop into the conflict, which brings him up to 8. Once again, I can't first grade math. So that's 5 spice from Memnon, and he's got 8 strength right now in the conflict. Let me think here. Okay, so I'm not going to use that to deploy with. I might as well use Leet Kynes and I'll spend a water to send an agent up to Hardy Warriors, which now I'm up there, but I'm only tied. I do get the water, but I don't get the alliance token yet. So I will deploy into the conflict as well. I'm going to deploy 2 troops in as well. So I'm going to tie Memnon with a combat strength of 8. Okay. Alright, then the Beast. I'll have to shuffle the House of Gall deck in a second. The Beast will deploy to Still Suits as well, which just means he goes up with the Fremen, which gives him another victory point, brings him up to 7 as well. Then I'll give the House of Gall deck a shuffle because we're going to need to draw a fresh card from Memnon here. I think that is there. The Beast. Alright. And to cut. Alright, Memnon's last agent, since he is first player, is going to harvest spice again. So he moves to the Great Flat, which gives him 3 spice. Unfortunately, he nets 1. He'll spend 7 to gain a victory point. Now, I need to make sure he doesn't win this conflict if I can. Because if he wins this actually, that's the Beast I moved up. This should be Memnon. If Memnon wins this conflict, the game is just over right here. So I do need to be very careful about that. So I think I will deploy. I think I will use the Imperial Spy. I don't really have a great deployment option right now. So I will use that to go. Yeah, I'll just use it to go up to wealth and gain 2 Solari. But I'm in very real danger of just getting whammied here. Let's see what the Beast does. He goes to Fold Space, which will bump his faction up. So now he's in the same dangerous place that I have Memnon in. But anyway, I see the Imperium Row is very expensive right now. So I have 2 influence and another sword to buy with. Which means I basically need to duck any sword. I can deal with 1 sword coming out of the House of Gall deck from Memnon. I can't deal with more than that. Because if I pull more than that, the game's just over. Then for 2 influence, I'll go ahead and grab the Guild Administrator. So we'll move that all to the discard pile. I'm not going to shuffle, and normally, well, let's replace the Imperium Row. Normally I would go ahead and draw my hand now, but first, Chris Knife for 3, it's another Fremen card. You can deploy to Fremen or triangle spaces with this. 1 influence, or 1 Solari, a sword, plus if you have a Fremen bond, so if you have another Fremen card in play, you get to go up in the Fremen reputation. So normally I would shuffle my discard pile right now and draw, but I'm not going to because if this is more than one sword, the game's going to be over at the end of the round. So we find 3 swords. So that means Memnon moves up to combat strength of 11, which means he does win the conflict, so that's 2 victory points and control of Imperial Basin. Not that it's going to matter. Second place, I would get 5 spice. And then the beast wasn't in the conflict at all, so that will do it there. Anyway, now we check. Now as part of the... Now how do we do this? I think we go through everything, and then we check in the... Yeah, we check in the recall phase. So we go through the maker phase, which means the Haga Basin would get bonus spice, but now in the recall phase, we see that Memnon has in fact gained 10 victory points, which means the game is over and he has won. So now let's move back up. Let's move up back up top to wrap this video up. So we're back up top to wrap this video up. We have lost this game of Dune Imperium. I'll say it in English one of these days. But it was kind of, well, it wasn't really too much of a nail-biter. I was really trying to play a much longer game in terms of picking my spot and not getting into conflicts right away. But I kind of was a little bit rushed into some of the early conflicts where I kind of had to jump in. Especially that one where I took control of Carthage. I kind of ran myself out of resources a little bit trying to get into that one. But hindsight, as they say, sometimes the decks just are not kind to you on that. But anyway, that will do it for this playthrough of Dune Imperium. Next week we'll come back to Earth and travel back in time a few hundred years. We'll also commemorate the Ides of March on Tuesday as we play Pandemic: Fall of Rome. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care everyone.